Today on the Somewhere in the Skies podcast, Ryan speaks with filmmaker Dean Alioto about his new documentary, The Alien Perspective.
You are now somewhere in the skies with your host, Ryan Sprague.
We have been talking off air with one of my oldest friends and colleagues in the UFO field. I have crashed on his couch. I have done panels with this man. I even was featured in one of his incredible horror movies, but that's a story for another day. Joining me once again, guys, is Dean Alioto. Welcome back to Somewhere in the Skies.
Thank you, Ryan. Glad to be back.
It's been a while. Like I said, we were talking off air. The last time you officially were on the show was really early in the Summer in the Skies days. And I had been a fan, obviously, of your found footage film, Alien Abduction, which later became Incident in Lake County. And we went through that thing with a fine tooth comb. It's still one of my favorite episodes I've ever done of the show.
Thank you. Yeah, that was fun. It was, that would have been before the resurgence of the McPherson tape, before we heard from like Teases and Fantastic Fest and all these terrific festivals that rediscovered it, Alamo Draft House, and which, as I had mentioned off camera, it looks like we're going to be having a limited theatrical release through Alamo Draft House, either this summer or in October. So it really, I mean, there were some early adopters who were into the movie and had been tracking it virally, if anything else. And then it kind of clicked there. And then with all these found footage documentaries, that was a whole other, resurgence.
Right. And, we should stress, as always, like, you were the pioneer, man. First found footage film. I mean, we have a question about that later in our listener question section. But, like, what does that feel like as a filmmaker? Like, to know that you were the first to do something. I mean, you're so humble about it. You rarely bring it up in interviews. Like, it's like people like me are the ones to be like, Dean, come on, man. Like, this is like bragging rights till the end of time. But yeah, what is it like to be the one to sort of get the first ever found footage film out?
Well, I am humble about it because genius doesn't really need to shout. I am just that genius. That's it was, again, you have to look at, the number one question, which is, what came first, the chicken or the egg? And for me, I would say the chicken here was I needed to make my first film by 25. Very simple. All of my idols, Spielberg, Scorsese, everyone had done that, Orson Welles. And so I had a buddy who said, look, I'll give you $6,500 to make your first film. And I said, wow, $6,500. Thanks, dude. The only thing I can shoot with that is a home video. And because I had been doing wedding videos with a buddy of mine, I was used to VHS and shooting in that format. And again, this is way back when. And I had dropped out of my second film school. I went to San Francisco State University and then went to USC for a semester and decided I was going to, learn by making crap movies, which is the best way to learn. And so anyway, it was 24 and it was getting close to 25. And I'm like, all right, well, let me see what I can do with this $6,500. And so at the same time, I'm reading that book that's on your shelf, which is Communion. And it scared the crap out of me. And this is more terrifying than any Stephen King novel I've ever read. But the thing that was so terrifying is that this was purported to be real. And so I thought, how do I do this in a way that puts the audience first person? And I just hit on the idea, oh, well, if it was like a wedding video or a home video where something interesting happens, then I'm going to be putting them right in it. And I also want to do it in one take. And I had certain type of things that I wanted to do that I really wanted to push the genre and see how it would play out. And so it was really this necessity. I mean, for the longest time, I thought of it as a gimmick. But I remember meeting with a buddy of mine after I finished shooting it, who was a filmmaker. And he was like, this is like cinema verite. This is a French version of a horror film and new wave. And so I kind of said, yeah, we'll see. And then, it just it took a long time for this fruit to ripen, because everything that I had set out to do intentionally, like actors talking over each other, long takes, all of it being handheld, all of those things at the time were looked upon as being just shit filmmaking. And so I had distributors that I met with throw me out of their office and say, don't come back until you've, got a real film. And so I thought it was shit myself for the longest time until, 1993, when someone edited off the credits and injected into the UFO community. And then that blew up. And then I had to go on national TV and debunk my own film. I think I'm the only filmmaker who's done that. And so, again, I feel like Forrest Gump in all this. The only thing that I take credit for is the fact that I, had this idea to do that, but it was really the act. It's a collective, man. It's like saying, I'm going to cook a meal and hopefully people show up. And we had a great cast and crew. The guy who did the ship and aliens, he only had a budget of $750. Oof. So it was just, it was fun. It was the funnest shoot I've ever had because I was making it up as I went. And so now I look back and I go, there's certain things that you want. Yeah, I would love to have had a film that got a wide theatrical, release. But I look back and I go, well, I'll take being a part of this whole new narrative in filmmaking. I'll take that over that. And I'm happy to be a part of that because there are other filmmakers who are taking it next level. And so I'm always curious to see what people do with, with the space and with the genre. So anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And again, like, guys, go back into the archives. We go like beat by beat, like how this whole thing played out. Like you said, the integration of your film involuntarily put into the UFO community and therefore put into UFO history. I mean, I remember back in the AOL chat room days when I was just getting into this topic, Dean, and like there were forums dedicated to, have you guys seen it? Have you seen the footage, the authentic footage of an alien abduction? And, 10 years, 20 years later, I finally met you and I'm like, oh my God, you're the one who made that. It's just crazy, man, how this stuff comes together.
It's been a crazy ride because when AGFA, Bleeding Skull, which is associated with Alamo Drafthouse, when they came to me and said, hey, we want to re-release it and do a high-end version and a whole bunch of special features, this and that, I said, great, but I don't really have it anymore because it had burned down in the fire and some VHS copies got out there. And I only have the original recorded tapes and not the other stuff around it. There was like 3 cuts in the entire film and stuff. And so I had to go online and find a version that someone had ripped from the original, and I had to download. So I had to rip a ripped version of my film
of your own movie,
and then put it on my timeline and grab the original footage and take and put it in and reassemble the whole thing so it would be the most pristine, highest version. And that was one that got released on Blu-ray. But anyway, so it was I had to get kind of reintroduced to it. In fact, when we had our 25th anniversary screening in Austin at Alamo Drafthouse at Fantastic Fest, I told Allie, my girlfriend, I said, get an aisle seat because I'm not sure how this is going to play. I haven't seen it in decades. And so, the last audience that I had, seen it with, that was with Jacques Vallée, and it was in San Francisco, and a cast and crew, family friendly, thing. They're always going to give you a lot of love. Right. But because of the distributor's disdain for it, I thought that this might play as shit, and some people are remembering it differently. But when Allie started digging into my thigh because she was scared, but she was still laughing at intentional and unintentional moments, I was like, okay, maybe this needed some time to ripen the movie. And now it's, and with analog just being this huge, resurgence with millennials and our generation as well, wanting to go back to the 80s, it just seems like it's found its time.
Absolutely. It's all in the timing. I know you've said that in the past, and it has made a resurgence. So I'm happy to hear it's going to get a theatrical release. I hope I'll be able to see that at some point. But Dean, we're here to talk about your new film, which is kind of a 180. I mean, you made a found footage film that a lot of people did think was real. You came out, you debunked that. This was a fictional story that you created. But now you're going doc style. Like, we're talking true stories here. And you have a brand new film that just came out called The Alien Perspective, Part 1, which we want to stress as well. There will be a Part 2. And that, I think, is what is catching a lot of people's attention, is that title of the film, The Alien Perspective. So I know you've talked at length about why you decided to name it that, but for our audience, would you mind telling us a little about why you chose to give it this title and what meaning that has behind the film?
Sure. Well, all this, happened because of this little, $6,500 found footage flick that I made, because I got invited to go back to the UFO convention where it was believed to be real in 92, 93. And they wanted to do a special anniversary screening. And so Karen Brard and Alejandro Rojas reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to come and speak at the International UFO Congress Convention? And I said, hey, no, because I was really nervous because the internet was rife with all these conspiracy theories. And so it was only through me showing behind the scenes videos and pictures and stuff to debunk it did, people go, okay, maybe it isn't. But then there were some people that still thought that I was full of shit, maybe work for the government. And while I found that amusing to a degree, I didn't want to, have this really awkward situation where I'm speaking to 1,000 people and some of them, are just thinking that, I'm the latest Rick Doty. And so I spoke there. I don't take myself serious at all, as you know. I take my work very serious, but I brought a lot of levity to it. So when when I did my presentation there, I found that people were enjoying the craziness of the ride that the film was and how it got out there and everything. And then, so that made me feel comfortable. And then I started meeting and talking to the community. Again, my only reference to UFOs and aliens was the research that I did for my two films, the McPherson tape, and then the remake I did for UPN, Alien Abduction Incident Lake County. And so when I went back to this, went to this UFO convention, my first UFO convention, by the way, I was like amazed at how great the community is. And I was amazed at the minds that were nibbling on the UFO phenomenon. And I'm meeting Mike Masters. Before Mike Masters had done a podcast, had done anything, he just had his book. I'm meeting some of the frontiers that are involved in this, like the simulation reality hypothesis, that we're all living in simulated reality. So there were all these new paradigms, and that blew me away. And because I have done documentaries in the past for A&E, Bravo, and Discovery, I thought there is something new to be said in this space. I feel like I can add to this. But the thing is, I don't want to go out and just hit some of the high notes that have been done before. I've got places where there are mic drops in part 1 and part 2, significant ones. But that wasn't enough for me. It was, how do I present this from a new angle, from something we haven't seen before? And so sometimes as a filmmaker, and I do this with my fictional films, I will say, all right, if I want to do a sci-fi thing, what are all the sci-fi films about? And then I'll do the opposite. And so in this case, every single UFO documentary that's ever been made that I'm aware of have always been from the human's perspective. Their take on this, just inherently, it's built in. Not that it was intentional, it just is that way. And so I thought, well, I work on crime shows. And crime shows, we look at it from the criminal's point of view, like the series Criminal Minds. So if we did that, what could be gleaned from that, even as a hypothesis? And so not literal, but just looking at it, how would we get that objectivity on humans and how we're perceived? And also get an understanding of what the phenomenon is simultaneously. When I set out to do this, that was a goal. But the other goal that was more important was, in one hand, I wanted to be able to service the people, the UFO community, who know a lot about this, very well educated. And I wanted to give them something fresh, which we've done. And we will in the other documentaries as well. But the other hand, equally important, is to bring in people who are UFO curious. I call them bi UFO curious, who don't know too much about it, but they've seen the news and maybe they tune into some of the hearings. So we start out at NASA, and then we go from there to getting into the rabbit hole. But we do it in a way that we're being led in by high academia. So it's not someone who's got their own theories and stuff. And there are some people that are not academic but have great ideas and stuff. But I wanted to bring in people from Oxford, from Harvard, NYU, et cetera. And so we're able to do that. And so I've been sitting, because it's taken 7 years to do this. I've been sitting on all this footage and creating all of this. And at the time, Michio Kaku had never, ever done a UFO doc. He since went on, I think, to do Terror in the Sky. And when that came out, I was like, God damn it. These things take a while, and I'm not going to rush it. In fact, I turned down Netflix. Netflix wanted to take the project. They saw the first episode and said, great, we're interested in this. We want to, run with it. And I said, well, hold on, I'd like to finish it. And then we can talk about, maybe making subtle changes, stuff that doesn't affect the integrity of it. That wasn't good enough for them. So I then just continued going. And so I'm giving a long answer here, but that's how it came about. As I was intrigued, as someone who's been for years an armchair prosumer, not an armchair expert in the UFO community, and wanted to be someone who was pretty efficient with that. And so it started out it was going to be a 9-month process. I was going to do 15 interviews, starting with Nick Pope and Travis Taylor. And that was at Alien Con that you and I were on a panel. And then just go from there. Well, it ended up being 66 interviews, 4 countries, and 4 documentaries, part 1, part 2, and then 2 other standalones. So the UFO phenomenon grabs your ass and throws you into it. And again, I've never seen a UFO. And so for me, I'm like Spielberg. Spielberg hasn't seen a UFO. This is the only thing we have in common, I think, is that we both really want to see UFOs and are envious of that. And so as a fictional filmmaker, I recreate that. But as a documentary filmmaker, I got even closer, and I was invited to go to alien abduction support groups or experiencer support groups and went multiple times. It was so fascinating. And I just thought, all right, this has got to get out. It has to get out in a way that is shot at a certain level and done in a way that is accessible to, not just the UFO community, but to everyone. And so, Leslie Kane was also very instrumental in helping shape the structure as well.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
May I ask, what was her input?
Well, so I did her interview, and as I was leaving, packing up to leave with my crew, she goes, so you're not going to have a host on this, are you? Which I thought was a strange question. I go, well, maybe. I know Dan Aykroyd is into this, and so maybe I might try to get him or someone else. But when I've done documentaries before, sometimes we do have hosts. And I said, but, I don't know. And she goes, okay. So if you don't have a host, you're not going to have a narration, are you? And I said, well, people do use narration to a great effect. So It is a tool. So maybe. And she goes, okay, you're not going to be in it, are you? And now I'm going, well, maybe, because I did, the McPherson tape, and that was a family being abducted by UFOs. And that was the gateway. And so that's the origin story. So maybe, but I go, I'm not married to it. I haven't started editing it yet. So I leave, and her words are going from just being this abstract thing and this thing that kind of threw me for a loop to being this sage, wisdom advice. Because what it did was, when COVID hit, I decided I've got more interviews to do, but I'll start editing this. And so I put in this place called holder where I had, this is what a host would be saying, and this is what they would look like. And I tried everything that I would have done naturally, automatically, I would have considered, having worked in documentaries again. And then her voice was in my ear going, you're not going to do that, really? Try something else, just to mix it up. Just try something. So I pulled it out. And then I was left with these great sections that I had to somehow link together. And so I decided, well, fuck it. I'm just going to put together these pods of these moments where we talk about this dynamic or this hypothesis and get those all together. And all of those worked great. And then it became a matter of, how do I link that together and how do I have it progress? And that took half a year to do. So it really pushed me. I mean, to the point that I called Yvonne Smith, who is, works with experiencers, a great hypnotherapist. And I said, Yvonne, she's in one of my docs, one of the other docs. I said, Yvonne, why am I stuck in this? I can't seem to get out. It's now, 5 years in and it's not stopping. And she says, I go, and I'm not an experiencer. I've never, had missing time that I'm aware of. And she laughed at me and said, Dean, they don't have to knock on your door to get to you. Because I said, I feel like there's an agenda going on here. I definitely feel like I'm being channeled a lot of the times, where my goal or my job as a filmmaker here is to get the hell out of the way and just listen to what's being channeled, or the muses, whatever you want to call it. A lot of the times I would do a cut and the next day I would look at it and I have no memory of how this thing actually played out. It was very spiritual. I think that's probably why, I stuck at it for so long, as I felt like there was some form of spiritual nutrition I was getting.
Yeah. That's fascinating. I mean, any writer will tell you, when the words start spilling out onto the page, or the editing process begins, it does feel like something else is working through you at times. And that's really interesting, especially with this alien perspective that you've chosen to approach this with. Who's to say? You set out to do one thing, it became another thing, which is brilliant, by the way. I love the fact that we don't have to depend on a host or narration. You let the threads that you're pulling throughout this first part of this series, it tells the story for you. And I think that's great. That's it's so unique, and, like you said, refreshing to see a film in this space, this UFO space, do something like that. Because I mean, unlike that, I'm known as the human guy in with all this stuff. All my books, my podcast is about the human perspective about this. And you're sort of the antithesis of that. It's okay, we've had the human perspective for a really long time. Let's take it from the other side. And I just love that. I love the opening to the film, which I do want to ask some technical questions.
Sure.
Too, but I love that. I love that Leslie Kane was kind of the angel and or devil on your shoulder, being don't do that, don't do that.
I would say fairy godmother.
Fairy godmother. I like that. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So you mentioned some names earlier, Michio Kaku, you had Deep Prasad, you had several other scientists, futurists, experiencers, everyone you can think of throughout this first part of the series. So that's my next question for you. How did you find these people? What made you choose them, I guess, or did they choose you? Was it divine inspiration? Yeah, the aliens.
The aliens choose. It was kind of this viral thing where, we started at NASA. So I'm talking to the deputy director of the TESS program, which is their own roving satellite that's going out there, imaging satellite that's going out there and imaging the universe. Now we've got the James Webb telescope. That's like insane. And so I'm talking to her about this. And so I say to her, and it's on camera, I ask her, I say, so what happens when these satellites that NASA has sent out, when you actually find that needle in a haystack that you're looking for, when you find a civilization, and it's very obvious that it's a civilization because maybe there's an electric grid and you see cities and stuff like that. What happens then? And she looked at me and she started to get the giggles. And she says, oh my God, we don't really have something. And she goes, it's so funny because we're constantly looking for the next flagship satellite imaging technology, but there really isn't a game plan for that. I'm like, you guys are NASA, seriously? And so she says, I guess you would go. She goes, the only person that I know that has a program, a protocol for this, ironically, because a lot of people, there's, controversy or some people, they've got a problem with it. I totally understand that. SETI. And so now I've got to go to SETI. So I go and I interview Seth Sostak, and I'm pinning him down to this. Okay, forget about whether or not aliens use radio technology, because they might have skipped that phase in their technology and be using something else. What is the protocol? And so I get the protocol that has never been really utilized. And so I get that. And then from there, it goes on to looking at other possibilities. And then so we start one person that leads to another. And so, like, as an example, to get to Leslie Kane, I'm interviewing people and they're saying, you should talk to Leslie about this one aspect of it. I go, great. And I reach out and Leslie gets, thousands of, offers, I'm sure, to come and talk on people's documentaries and stuff. And she's very discriminating about that, as she should be. And so I had to come at her from so many different angles that finally, I'm sure for her, it was just like, all right, fine. I'm going to be in town here and blah, blah, blah. And even when I was coming over there, she says like, look, they're doing construction outside the window, so you may not want to come. And I'm like, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
If I have to do subtitles, I'm getting you. Because the other thing is, I really worked hard to ask questions that I've not seen asked before. And so, and that's my background doing all these, documentaries and crime shows and stuff like that. And so once I got to her, I was able to get to Diana Pasulka, who is the host, if you will, of part 2. And so one person would lead to another, and it just built and built. And then all of a sudden I'm at Oxford talking to the guy who created the simulation reality hypothesis, Dr. Nick Bostrom. I'm at NYU interviewing Dave Chalmers, who is a brilliant mind philosopher who worked with the Wachowski brothers on The Matrix to do some follow-up essays. All these great minds, and I'm having them nibble, munch on the same idea, on the same phenomenon, and look at it. And one of the biggest things that I'm most proud of is that we have the last interview of one of the Teslas of our generation. And I don't mean the car, Nikola Tesla, which is Doug Trumbull, the Oscar-winning special effects guy. This is the last interview he's done. He passed away. And so we've got him, and he talks about his work that he did on 2001 Space Odyssey, on Close Encounters, just a genius mind with Mark D'Antonio. So it's great to have these heavyweights weigh in on something that we all find fascinating. And what do they have? What are their private beliefs that they have? I was really keen to pull that out. So to answer your question, it became one person that would lead to another. Oh, you got to talk to this person. Or I would see a thread. I would do my research. So it was a viral thing that just kept going and going. And I couldn't fit it into one documentary. And I want to kind of address that as well. That the reason why there's 2 documentaries isn't because, we're trying to milk this. Far from it. Everyone, the reaction from it has been people are seeing stuff they've never seen before, and which is terrific as far as hearing and seeing stuff. But it was because there are 2 separate things. The second one goes in another direction. And I don't want to give, away what that is, but it would be incongruent would not be a good match to try to fit it all into one movie. The second one's going to be longer, but it's it is, yeah, they should be looked upon as two different books. And because I'm a filmmaker, I look at everything that way. And so like the first half of a movie is one movie, and the second half is always like a second, like, Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
It's rescue the princess. Let's get that princess. We got that princess. Wait, what? We have to now take down a Death Star? So that becomes the second half, and that's an even bigger, more action-oriented. So this is the same kind of concept here, but that's why the first one is hosted by Michio, and the second one has a separate host. That I wanted to make that delineation.
Interesting. Yeah, and I mean, it's just like the UFO topic. The minute you think you have a hold on it, it goes in a completely different direction, and then you have to like spend another that much brain space and years of research to be like, okay, I think I grasp this, but that doesn't connect to this. How do I get to, point J when I'm still at point negative A? You know what I mean? It's crazy, man. So I understand that.
Well, your listeners will notice
yeah.
that it's the phenomenon. The biggest thing that I glean, like looking back right now, presently where I'm at this moment, I say it's everything that we think it is, and it's none of what we think it is. As I went along, I had my theories of what I liked. Is it Jacques Vallée, interdimensional, or is it this or that? It's kind of like the Beatles. I got John there. My first love was of the Beatles. My favorite member was Paul McCartney. Then I went to John Lennon, and George, and then Ringo. And so each of these things are giving their due, given their day in court. Each of the theories, if they're from the future, if they're from another dimension, are they from another planet, which seems prosaic at this point. And as Jacques Vallée says, and we have the quote in the movie, that if they turn to be from another planet, I'm going to be disappointed.
Right. Yeah. That'd be the most boring answer. I know. Yeah. And you do tackle a bunch of these different theories in the film, which I do want to ask you a little bit about that. But you mentioned a couple names that struck a chord with me, obviously, as someone who speaks to a lot of experiencers. Travis Walton. Who else did you have? You had Jim.
Briefly.
Yep. You had Peniston from the Rendlesham incident. You had the Tic Tac witnesses. So what made you decide to tackle the experiencers in the movie? And the animations, we have to touch on that because, oh man, those things were amazing. Probably my favorite part of all of it. It just enhanced the experience, no pun intended, when it came to a lot of this. So yeah, I guess, prong A, what made you want to use the experiencers in this, and prong B, tell us a little bit more about the animations.
Sure. Okay. So for me, I look at the phenomenon in kind of like a menu, if you will. And footage of UFOs is kind of the entree, or excuse me, not the entree. It's the appetizer. Mm-hmm. The photographs of the appetizers, and it's some can be faked and everything. The footage, especially now, it's amazing. And I've got a lot of friends who will call me and say, "Hey, can you help me? Either confirm or debunk," which no one can really do. But I take my best shot at it because I've done a lot of special effects, so I'm pretty good at being able to sniff out fraud, hoax footage. But it was really kind of looking at this like that menu. So you go from the appetizer, and then when you get into the entree, which to me is between the two of them, I should say, the photographs. That's all great. That's an appetizer. And then you've got your salad, and the salad is the testimonies, right? Mm. That's where you've got people that are coming out and saying, "Hey, I know of someone who's seen this footage and seen these crafts and everything." I'm still actually craving more of a salad that I'm getting from the hearings. I really want someone to say, "No, I was in that program. I touched the craft. Or I saw firsthand, the dead alien bodies." So shy of them dropping a UFO tailpipe on the desk of the hearing, or an alien hand or something, that's the salad. Now we're going to get into the entree. And the entree are the the people who are having disclosure and have been having it for decades. And these are the experiencers. And these are the people that have not had a seat at the table yet, which is very strange. And I feel like so much can be gleaned from these people that are getting insights, that are having first hand-to-hand combat, almost with them. First hand, that's a Freudian slip, I guess. Contact, hand-to-hand contact, combat. So to sequester them to the sidelines and say, well, that's a whole other kind of thing, and we're not sure we want to talk about that, is kind of bullshit. And so for me, ultimately, it arrives there. And so the second episode gets into it even more, but we do get into it in the first one, as you pointed out. But then there's another standalone documentary that's going to be coming out next year. Maybe this year. It should be this year. And that's all about the experiencers. Mm-hmm. And so there's an arc here. There's an actual plan of attack here that I'm doing with these films. I'm starting out at NASA and then leading to the experiencers and having them have their day. And we have experiencers that haven't talked about this for 17 years. We have, just to tease it out, we have 2 people who discover real time that they've had experiences. Happens on camera, real time. It's insane. That like those other 2 documentaries, they could not fit within what we were trying to do. It was so special. It needed to have its own moment. And so that one is all about the experiencers, from Barney and Betty Hill all the way up to this current, moment. And so for me, having gone to experiencer support groups, the first one I went to, my girlfriend's like, well, we'll see what happens, with this, kind of reticent, because she's had to be along this journey with me, and she's very good at grounding me and keeping one foot, out of the rabbit hole. But she also believes a lot of stuff that she's heard. So anyway, I go to this experiencer support group, and I know there's going to be a dozen people, and I have my preconceived ideas. Again, I'm coming in it from your average audience's point of view. I come in there, and then everyone starts introducing themselves. Hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm an architect. Hi, I'm so-and-so, and I'm a doctor. I give TED Talks. I am a Homeland Security supervisor. I'm a major in the Army. And now I'm realizing that I'm kind of like the least accomplished person in this room. And then talking about their experiences. And I'm just sitting there going, I've got a really good bullshit meter that's been developed with 20 years of doing crime shows. Not a blip. So all of a sudden, the back of my hair is, staying on end. I'm asking questions and I'm getting intelligent answers, and things that I thought were the integrity of the experiencer story was weak, I'm poking at, and they're saying, oh, that's because of this or that. So I'm going, oh, I haven't heard that. And people haven't heard that. This needs to get out. But that knocked me on my ass. And the thing that, and I'll be talking about it much more when the experiencers documentary comes out, is if someone tells you that they were abducted by someone who grabbed them, a human, you would never say to them, oh, really? Was it a white van or a black van? Was it, duct tape or rope? You'd never, ever do that shit. Mm-hmm. But if someone says, I was abducted, had this experience with aliens, they go, oh, really? It was a UFO. Did it come and get you? Did you go up in a beam? Did you this or that? It's disgusting. And so as John Mack said, Professor John Mack said, it doesn't matter whether this is happening in the physical world or a mental world, psychological world. It is occurring. You can't fake PTSD. And so for me, to not give these people empathy and to not have compassion for these people is tantamount to being a bully. And that shit needs to stop now. That's, that's a sticking point for me, is that these people are doing their best to function and getting by. And when people say, I just don't understand, it's too abstract for me, I go, okay, here, I'm going to walk you through this. Okay. You're on a deck, sitting there on a deck, you got your deck chair and you're there, you're looking out at maybe the ocean or forest, whatever. You're enjoying, and it's in the middle of the afternoon. And around the corner comes a chimpanzee. How much is that going to fuck you up? How much are you going to go, wait, what is going on? This should not be here. That's going to jack you up for a while. Did that happen? And then it leaves. Did it happen or not? Now imagine a humanoid walking around that corner. You don't have any clue until you're put in this position. And as much as early on, in the 80s and everything, I really wanted to see an alien and I wanted to have that experience. And that part of me was kind of envious of Whitley Strieber. The more that I've gone into this, the more I go, I think I'm fine talking to people, witnesses that have taken that hit for us, you know? So anyway, that's why I really am leading to that. That's why it's important to talk to these experiencers. And you mentioned, Jim Peniston. He mentions things that he's never mentioned before that we have in the first movie and also in the second. At one point we had to pause filming, and then he said, no, let's continue going, because he broke down. It was just like too much for him, because the way that I question people is I try to kind of take them back to that moment, literally. Not like I'm putting them in a trance, but he went into his own almost fugue state where he was coherent and everything. But he said to me, Dean, you have to understand where you're putting me. I am there. And I go, well, that's good. He said, no, listen. There's a tree next to me on the left-hand side. I'm standing there. I can see the bark, the detail of it. I can see the dew on the leaves. I can describe each of these things. Nothing in my past, Dean, do I have this recall. Only this event. Well, that hasn't been, dived into before. So that's what I want. And because I'm slightly dyslexic, I need to visualize this. I need to see that. And so I need to see him in the forest. I need to see what the craft looks like. I need to see him there. And I don't want to do a reenactment when I'm trying to find an actor who kind of looks like him from, 30, 40, whatever years ago, who maybe can act, maybe he can't. I want to get an animator who can actually draw him from pictures of what he looked like during that time, what his energy was like, what was the dynamics, what was the geography of that situation in the forest at the time. The trees, everything was painstakingly recreated. His outfit, painstakingly recreated. And so that was important to get that. And so in order to do that, I needed to get an animator who could do that, could deliver it. And so there was an Oscar-winning documentary. It came out in 2016 called Searching for Sugarman. Fantastic documentary. If you haven't seen it, check it out. The animation was exceptional. I tracked that guy down and I said, look, I need whatever whatever intern or anyone that you're working with who you feel, because I didn't know if I could afford this guy and bring him on. He goes, well, let's talk. I got 10 minutes. And so I get him on a Zoom and I'm talking to him. 45 minutes later, he says, I'm doing this. This is just so wild, so incredible. I want to draw these images. And I was like blown away, honored beyond belief. His name is Arvid Steen. And so he came in and just next leveled it. And so when it came to the Tic Tac event, that's one that we've all seen. And and what it really is it's just looking at this little blip. It's almost like playing Pong, right? You look at this black and white screen and you can only get so much from a game of Pong, and you see it move out or you see it go fast or rotate. Well, I've heard Fravor's story a million times. I want to see what that looks like. I want to know when he's saying he looks down and he sees the cross beam structure of something that's just under the surface, and this little tic tac turns, and as Fravor goes, bing. I want to see what that looks like. Don't tell me about it. I want to see it as well. I want to see when he gets almost in a dogfight with it. I want to see from inside the cockpit. And I also want to see from the Tic Tac's perspective, looking at Fravor. So for me as a filmmaker, I want to make that cinematic. And I also want to do first person like I did with the found footage film. I want to take us there. And so with the collaboration with Arvid and me, where sometimes I would say, okay, the camera will be over here. And he would say, Dean, this is animation. We can be inside the cockpit. And I'm like, oh shit, of course.
Right.
So it was a whole new tool. And for the first time, you get a chance to really take it in and really see what it was like with as much exactitude as possible. So that was for me a next level thing that I wanted to show audiences. And And so that's in there. And so those two cases we hit, and there's other cases that we hit in part 2 as well. But yeah, I mean, the biggest reaction that I got was Sean Cahill, and he went to the LA world's premiere of the Perspective, and I showed it to him, and I was a little nervous because he's in the documentary. I interviewed him, and here's someone who got naked eyes on these the night before, the discs, and he saw 6 or 7 of them rotating. And so for him, who was chief petty officer, was a part of this whole thing and sending out favor and all that shit, it was important that I get a firsthand person's take on it. And it was a little nerve-wracking because I had already finished it by the time he was able to get to it because of our schedules and everything. And so he saw it up on the big screen and he was emotional about it. And so I interviewed him after, and he said, that is what it was like. That is what I felt. That is the closest to the visceral effects that I had. And so he was really happy to have this be shared because he felt like now people can understand what it was like and how we came upon this story. And so we start with Kevin Day with the radar, go to Sean, and then go to Fravor, and we kind of reverse engineer it and go out. So yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, the way the whole story unraveled and the way, you told the story through animation and through the testimony. It was great, Dean. It really was. And again, kudos to the animator. Fantastic work. The Somewhere in the Skies podcast is free to listen to every week. But if you would like to help support the show, we have a very active Patreon page where you give what you think the show is worth. In return, you'll get early access to the main show, bonus episodes, and priority to ask our guests your listener questions. Your support truly makes the show continue and grow. So, to learn more and to join, visit patreon.com/somewhereskies. I guess move a little to these theories. That was another really fascinating section in the doc. Was you mentioned Michael Masters? Now this extraterrestrial model that he sort of coined is probably one of my most favorite theories on the entire alien question that's ever been brought forward. And I mean, that even bleeds into some of the Rendlesham case. Some of those guys think it was, what Masters would say is kind of us from the future. You mentioned simulation theory. Obviously, ET is like the biggest theory out there, but there's so many others too, especially if you dig into the work of LA and stuff like that. What is your favorite theory in exploring all of this? Do you have one, or does it change day to day like it does for me? Right now, it's still us from the future, but what about you? What's your favorite theory that you explore?
Well, it's kind of all the above, none of the above. I think that it could be interdimensional. Here's the way I look at it. You have to just, by virtue of the fact that we are going to be figuring out, travel between dimensions. I mean, the Higgs-Boson collider has shown us that there's so far 11 dimensions that we've discovered. So that is going to be a factor. From another planet, definitely that's going to happen. I mean, space travel, that shit's going to get worked out. Again, the hubris that these scientists, and I'm going to throw out there some of the hubris that Neil deGrasse Tyson has thrown out there is like, no, these physics are the physics, and it's like, no, they're not. Physics do change, and they've already started to change.
Yep.
And even Einstein had spooky, physics that he hated, loathed, because they didn't fall into a certain clean, paradigm. But we're not even a type 1 species. So there's so much more. And thank God, there's so much more to come that we're going to discover. But I would say that if I had to pick one right now, that let's say the Greys as an example. Mm-hmm. I think that and Masters will tell you that he wasn't the originator of this idea, but he took it next level. The extraterrestrial hypothesis makes to me more sense than anything on the face of it. What I mean by that is, as an anthropological biologist, his job is to reverse engineer from where we are today, 2025, all the way back to coming out of the sludge, little, polywogs. And so if he projects that out, he's just like, Dean, it's math. We have bigger eyes. We're going to get bigger. Our craniums are going to be bigger. We're going to be losing our hair. Depending on where we're having to live, if we have to live underground or whatever, our skin could turn ashen. I said, hey, what about the height? Because these things are smaller and we seem to be getting bigger. And he says, not necessarily. All throughout history, mankind has varied in height based on food scarcity. So it's like, oh shit, okay. So maybe there's a reason why they would be, both. But the fact is that they're bipedal humanoids like us. Michio Kaku was saying, chances of them being exactly that shape and everything is really remote. He said, if anything, because life comes from water, that's such a main component that you have to have. That like most of the oxygen that we get aren't from trees, it's from coral. That they could look like lobsters, And so the fact also getting ahead of things, but if you look at the hybrid program, we can't mate, right, with apes, chimpanzees, which we share nearly identical DNA and genes and everything. We can't do that. But these species, this other species that we're calling another species, can come and can do that. That doesn't make sense. It does make sense if they're us from the future. And right now, we've realized that we don't have to worry anymore about the population explosion. We're starting to see a decrease. And so if it gets to a certain point where we don't have another species on the planet like Neanderthals, which we don't exist, we're not here today having this podcast without mixing our gene pool with that other just offshoot of our species. So it seems to make sense when you do the paradigm of the hybrid phenomenon in there. It really starts to ring true when you go, oh, okay, well, this makes sense. But, we haven't even gone into why, what are they going to be doing with these hybrids and how that goes. And we'll get into that in the other docs. But that to me seems to be holding up pretty well. It's not addressing the praying mantis looking, creatures. It's not addressing the reptilians, but it's funny. It didn't end up in the documentary, but I said to Masters, I go, Michael, it's interesting that no one talks about reptilian hybrids or praying mantis hybrids. It's always the grays. And so that is even more of a supporter of your case. And Mike goes, deadpan Mike, he goes, I like that. You mind if I take that? And I go, yeah, all yours. But that's what was fun also. I should say that doing these 66 interviews was so much fun to sit down and, because, your listeners, they'll have questions, we're listening to Coast to Coast. I mean, that was a gateway drug for all of us. And it's like, oh, I wish that they just asked this or that. And so for me, I got a chance to do that for myself and do that. And hopefully those questions I asked, people wanted to know as well. So.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a journey, man. And you learn along the way. Like, it's not like you're preaching to people. Like, this is you taking a journey through the eyes of all these different people. And then ultimately the eyes and perspective of the alien itself and what that could tell us about them. It's so fascinating. Coast to Coast. You mentioned Coast to Coast. I got to ask you, we just got word that apparently Paul Giamatti is going to be playing Art Bell in a movie. I don't know if that rumor's true or not.
It's true.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, I'll confirm it. It's true. It's being done through Radio Silence, which is a really cool production company. They did Abigail, the horror movie, and they did Till Death Do Us Part. I think that was they do dark comedy horrors. And they're very good at that. And I remember listening to Art Bell. I remember that guy calling in. I mean, it's been debunked, but I shouldn't say that. Always leave it open. But yeah, this guy calls in and he, says this is what's happening, and then he, the transmission gets canceled mid-airing, and it was just fucking great. I mean, when I first heard that, I was all over. It's like, oh my God, this is great. And so, it's Paul Giamatti, I guess, is going to be playing Art Bell. I mean, does it get better than that?
What a world we're living in. Well, the reason I bring it up, Dean, is because we also got word that one of your heroes, Steven Spielberg, has renamed apparently his new film, UFO themed movie, to Disclosure.
Yeah.
And so all know that, like, in Close Encounters, that J. Allen Hynek made a cameo in it. I asked this on a live stream that I did recently when we learned that the movie was now going to be called Disclosure, and then going back to Hynek being in it, a character being based on Jacques Vallée in Close Encounters. But I want to know from you, as a filmmaker, as a Spielberg fan, like, if you could choose one person in the UFO world to make a cameo in this upcoming Steven Spielberg movie, who would you want it to be?
There's this guy who's a big Spielberg fan named Dean Alioto. I would like to nominate him.
Never heard of him.
Cameo. Shy of that, I'd say my buddy Paul Hynek, his son.
Good choice.
I think that would be pretty cool to kind of pass the baton and have him be in there.
That's genius. I never would have thought of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say Paul or Jacques, one or the other, or both.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. Sorry, that was a super whiplash question, but I did want to get your thoughts on it. Well, hey, I've got a couple listener questions if you're willing to stick around for these.
Absolutely.
Is that cool?
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Let's get to them. So our Patreon subscribers get priority to ask guests questions. They go right to the top. So we're going to read those here. I've got Miguel on Patreon asks, Dean, do you have any weird or funny stories to share from filming? Anything super memorable, weird, scary, funny? I know there's always things that happen on these shoots.
Yeah. Oh boy, let me think about that. I'm
putting you on the spot.
Yeah, no, I'm editorializing them because there's nightmare things that happen that, but there's also happy accidents that happen. That's a really good question. Boy.
No rush.
I just did this feature that's going to be, if any of your fans are into horror, we're going to be at Horror Hound next month in Cincinnati, which is the mothership of all horror film festivals. It has 40,000 people that show, and we're going to be showing the film there. So this film, it's called The Last Podcast. Okay, here I got a story for you. So Martin Willis, buddy of mine, he gets he's going to go in for heart surgery. And so I've been his guest several times. And so he says, hey, Dean, can you fill in for me? It's going to be about a month when I go through this. And I said, yeah, absolutely, dude. Happy to fill in. So I'm essentially, like you, I'm being a podcast host for a month. And unfortunately, some of the listeners encouraged me to do my own podcast. And so why I say unfortunately is because if I get into anything, as you can tell, I go full hardcore into it. And I did that with this. And so I spent almost half a year trying to come up with a perfect name, the perfect logo, perfect format. I'm a filmmaker and I also love music. I'm a mediocre drummer. So how do I get something that fits all of that in? And so at one point, Allie, my girlfriend, looked over at me at my desk and she says, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm doing research. I got to come out and I got to get the 100,000 subscribers. Got out of the gate. I got da. And she says, no. Why are you doing this? And I said, because it's going to be fun. And she goes, babe, it doesn't look fun to me. And I thought about it and I went, yeah, she's right. Screw this. This isn't fun. I'm doing this for all the wrong reasons. And so I cut myself off cold turkey and went, this isn't meant to happen right now. And so I stopped that, but I had lost that time. Meanwhile, the Directors Guild and SAG Screen Actors Guild are threatening to go on strike in June. And this is February 1st. And this is a couple years ago. And I'm like, oh my God. So I haven't made a movie since 2018, Portal, which you're in. And I've got to make something. I'm going nuts. I've been doing documentaries for too long. I got to do a movie. And so because of this experience, I decided I'm going to fold that into a new script. And it's going to be about a young podcaster who debunks the supernatural. And so kind of put it on its ear. And he partners up with this associate junior professor at Pasadena Tech, and who can scientifically prove that there is no afterlife. And the experiment goes horribly awry. And without giving too much away, they discover the afterlife does exist, but it's not what they think it is. And so it's a dark comedy. And so that was a really nice way that this thing came about. And so between February and June, it was written, prepped, shot, done.
Whoa.
And this actor that I got for it, a buddy of mine, his mother owns this management company. And he says, take a look at any of the actors. I always start there and I take a look and say, okay, well, I'll get this person to co-star to play this role, whatever. But I know that I'm going to be looking for a lead, with a big name, blah, 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 even though this is going to be a lower budget project. So I see this one actor named Eric Tabak. And I'm like, this guy's got a really good look. And so I go and I search him out online. And I see that this guy has had 500 million views on BuzzFeed and Yes Theory. He does these skits and stuff. He's funny as shit. And then I find this video because he's got his own channel. And it's called Why I'm Quitting My YouTube Channel. And I'm like, this is nuts. And I go and I watch him, and he says he doesn't like who he's becoming. He's becoming obsessed. He's becoming the character in my script. And so I call my buddy and I said, that's my guy. And so I find out that he's at Juilliard. And I'm like, oh, shit. Well, when is he going to be available? Well, he's not going to be available until, the end of May. And I'm like, okay, well, I need to get him. So in between his first and second year at Juilliard, I get this guy. And he's like mid-20s. He's a young Tom Hanks. And so brought him out, and my stuff, a lot of comedy. There's a lot of dialogue. And the timing is critical. And this kid he's so good that I couldn't tell what I had written and what he, added, flourishes he added. Anyway, that was something that was a great experience where I feel like the muses, were behind this and how that all, played out. So I would say that sometimes things happen for a reason. You go, oh my God, I've wasted this. No, you didn't. Nothing is ever wasted in life. And so that's the strangest story of how it all came about, and boom. And now we should be getting a wide theatrical release later on this year with that film. So
awesome.
That's work done right now. So I can't say too much more about it until we lock that deal, but
okay.
Yeah.
Cool. What's it called again, Dean?
The Last Podcast.
Love it. Love it.
And Dave Foley. Dave Foley has a cameo in it.
Oh, awesome.
He's in it. Yeah, he's great. Yeah.
Dave's great. Who is also in your documentary, guys. So
yes,
you can catch him in there as well. Cool. This next Patreon question comes from Landon. And he says, you pioneered the found footage genre, no matter what anyone else says. Did you ever think your alien abduction found footage film would become what it is today? So we kind of touched on that. But yeah. Anything else to add to that, I guess?
Well, it's yeah. I mean, the short answer is no. I had no idea, dude. I thought I just ticked that box of making my first film, and I just thought it was this big gimmick. And so the fact that I did things either out of ignorance or because I wanted to see it. And it turned out that it hadn't been done beforehand, was just a nice mashup, So Yeah, I would have never predicted that I would be doing a remake, let alone, 40 years, geez, 89. How many years is that? 35, 36 years later.
Uh,
Still talking about this thing. It's nothing short of a miracle, for me. And yeah, I'm glad to be a part of a new narrative in filmmaking. And so it's still a trip for me. I still am a little bit disassociated with it because it was done so long ago, and it was just meant to be a little fun thing. So
yeah, but it lives on, which is more than like most filmmakers can ever truly say. So I think it's great, man. Alyssa on Patreon asks, what do you think about these congressional UFO hearings, the UFO whistleblowers, and the whole drone invasion thing going on right now? It's just like, man, we can't stop talking about all this stuff. Like 2025 truly started with a bang when it comes to UAP. I won't say UFOs per se,
correct.
maybe, but what do you make of everything going on in the UFO world today?
The hearings have reached the zenith of what they were meant to do, as far as having testimony.
Mhm.
We still haven't had anyone come out and say, here is, again, the tailpipe of a UFO. Here is an alien hand or whatever. That hasn't happened yet. And so I'm not sure how much further you can go. What's next level for the hearings. Again, it would have to be firsthand. Someone came out and would have to actually show pictures or bring some artifacts. Until that happens, I think we've made a great case that this is happening. The government does have these programs. So that's a huge accomplishment. We need to kind of, enjoy that meal and not try to slam down a dessert on top of that, right?
Right.
So with regards to, what was the second part?
We had like the whistleblowers that have come forward. I mean, you had David Grush, but now you have this new guy,
Oh, well,
Jake
no, drones.
Barber.
We're talking, yeah.
Yeah.
There's that guy. He didn't shoot that footage of the egg
Correct.
being dropped.
Yeah.
So again, please let's get first hand people and because there have been people that have done it. Fravor certainly came out and said he had that interaction. We can do that. The drones. Let's talk about the drones. So November 28th. I'm in Los Angeles. I'm looking out over Silver Lake, the reservoir, and I see 7 drones. And I grab iPhone and I videotape it. And I'm just kind of marveling at, why do you need so many drones? Because I'm a filmmaker, I use drones all the time, but I only use one.
Yeah.
And it just seems like that's overkill unless there's a chase scene and one's going to pick up but it's not. They're moving strangely, and all of a sudden they get really bright and they get, more subdued. Green, red, and blue colors. Are some of them helicopters? I can't tell, but I'm seeing this whole big light show. And so I'm wondering, well, maybe something's going on, some event. And who knows? And so I videotape it for 4.5 minutes. I get tired. I go back inside. And I can still see it out my window, and it's going on for a while. And I'm getting on with my life or whatever. And then the drone flap happens. And I'm like, okay, wait a second. And I go back and I look at that footage and I'm like, oh shit. This is, I still think they're probably prosaic or whatever, but whatever it is, it was in my backyard.
Wow.
And so I took the footage, and my daughter's like, Dad, you got to put this footage out there. Because I said, I really want to get feedback on this. She goes, you got to put it out there. And so she set up a TikTok account, which is my production company, Captured Pictures Official. So if you go to Captured Pictures Official, you can see the footage. I broke it down into 4 clips, and it's insane in retrospect. And so again, I'm a debunker. And so I debunk things that are hoaxes. I don't debunk, things that are legit. But as the strictest term, debunking, that's what you do when you find things that are bunk. You debunk it. And so this was, the closest that I've gotten to something strange and off the charts, and so you can see that footage. But more importantly, the government, everyone's going, Trump, he's going to come and he's going to promise he's going to give us this. And instead we got the exact opposite. He comes out and they say, oh, it's a whole big nothing deal. The FAA, they came out and they knew about it. And it's like, well, no, they didn't. They didn't give us answers beforehand. The FBI saying in testimony that they're concerned about this thing. Those two wouldn't talk. It's a play out of the Roswell playbook. It's bullshit. And so that's not an answer. It doesn't allow for the fact that it makes no sense. And the follow-up questions were horrendous. George Knapp did a big thing on it. It's like 3.5-minute segment on it where he threw down on them, where he's like, why didn't you guys ask the press spokesperson? Why didn't they say, okay, well, why are they flying if this is research and stuff that the government's doing over civilians? When did that become something that we did?
Yeah.
And also, how are they staying up for so long? And also, it's not just happening here, it's happening internationally. Yeah. So what's going on? And
we had them here in Scotland.
Yeah, in Scotland. So, and then now we have the new thing where a politician comes out and says there was a mothership. Iran has a mothership of drones that they're unleashing. And then the White House comes out and says that's complete BS. So we're not getting any more answers. So far, this administration hasn't delivered on what people were hoping for. And so I still feel like there's some more work that needs to be done by the politicians to get the administration to deliver. And there's enough people on both sides, bipartisan, to be able to do that, I think. So, I'm still holding a candle that we're going to, get that. But anyway, so that's my take on that.
Interesting. Yeah. And we'll put a link to the TikTok for you guys below to check out the videos over there. It's interesting. I did not think that in 2025 that the UFO topic would lean so heavily into the drone thing, but I guess we should have seen that coming in some ways. That they get mistaken for UFOs all the time, and now this is a way, Dean, I see, where we're now conditioned to think that all UAP are drones. You know what I mean? It's like it's almost a scapegoat now in so many ways.
Yeah, it's the problem is that anytime there is some new technology that's going to be brought out there, we're going to to get that. But again, the big argument, there's two things that really annoy me with counter arguments to these crafts. Is like supersonic. They go, well, I'm sure we're close to developing that. And China, they've got their own kind of, version, this and that. And I'm like, okay, guys, first of all, we're talking 2004 when the stuff went down, 2004, 2005, 2015. We didn't have it then, but we're not talking about this specific event. We got to talk, if we're going to do that, we're going to compare it. We've got to compare it to the decades where these crafts, they used to be called propane, these big propane tanks or cigar shaped UFOs. This has been around for a long time. So this isn't some new technology. This has been around. So that gets, annoying. And we're not there with regards to the way that technology comes out. It's kind of like in a movie where you pull the gun out at the beginning of the first act. That gun's going to get used in the third act.
Chekhov, baby.
Yeah, the military's the same way. And so, you've got the stealth bomber. As soon as that sucker's perfected, it's going to get used.
Yeah.
No one has been using any of these supersonic technology to drop bombs. And so if Russia had this technology, they would have used it on Ukrainians. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and we would have used it in Afghanistan. We would have done some little special, whatever. And so that's never been reported that I've, credible reports. So yeah, it's a bummer how that gets folded in, and it's just, oh, well, it's, and people will say this all the time. I get emails all the time saying, it's us. It's us. I'm like, who are you? Well, I've worked in the military. Did you work on this project? No, but I know. I just know that that's how we operate. It's like, and I have Travis Walton saying every time he does one of these conventions, people come up to him and they have all the answers. And he's like, you don't have the answers. No one has all the answers. And if you think you do, there's another answer there, because they're tricksters, whatever's visiting us, they're not going to let us know. Here's the thing. Seeing UFOs and talking to the experiences and everything, if you put it in the context of this being, we want to get to the climax of the movie, right? These are teasers. We haven't earned that journey to get us to, we haven't seen the first act, the second act of this movie to get to the third act yet. We still have a lot of evolution to do as a species. We're still animalistic. We're still warring. These guys, where they're coming from, they work that shit out. And how I know this is because they're using anti-gravity technology. If we had anti-gravity technology like they have, it is going to get perverted. The military, governments will do that. All of a sudden, you'll start seeing villages or platoons and stuff literally levitated and thrown off the planet. And so until we get to a place where we take technology and we use it for its best possible purpose, I don't know how we're going to have a communion with these in a coherent, conscious way. So I think where we're at right now is we're getting great trailers for what's to come, and that's exciting.
Spoken like a true filmmaker. I love that, man. I love that. Well, hey, last two questions for you. You left us with quite a cliffhanger with the first part of this series. I won't give anything away. It's sort of a bookend thing, which I love. It kind of, you start the film one way, you end in one way. So my question is there anything you can tease with part 2? When can we expect part 2? And yeah, is there anything you can share on that?
So we have some material. We have 3 samples of some material, and the top, and I always mispronounce this, metallurgist, who studies not just metals, but specifically is a pioneer in the field of extraterrestrial material. And what I mean by that is comets or asteroids that have come here, analyzing the metals and stuff. This person who we're going to be introduced in part 2, he is the inventor of this technology that can actually pinpoint and derive how old the structure is of metals. And so he is the top in his field, and he's out of Caltech. And so we do a blind Pepsi test. That's as much as I can say about that.
Okay.
And the results are interesting. I will leave it at that. But yeah, that is and so again, we're still completing animation on part 2, and there's still some stuff being done and tests and everything. So, but that'll probably come out June 1st is what we've targeted. I just had my conversation with my distributor. So yeah.
Cool. Looking forward to it, man. Loved the cliffhanger. Can't wait to see what those results are. Well, last question, where can we find the film? And anything else that you got coming up, if you're willing to share with us, give it all to us, Steve.
Sure. So you can either purchase the film or rent it on Apple TV or Amazon. Apple TV is a little bit better, I think, just as a filmmaker, because their player is, I think, has a little bit more definition. I think there's something about their the way that they've got the codec for that plays nicer. But you can get both of those, and you may want to purchase, because we priced it at a very reasonable price. We're not doing $20. We're doing, I think it's around $10, because you'll want to hold on to that when you go and you see part 2. Not that it's necessary, but you're going to end up re-renting it anyway. So you might as well save yourself. But you can get on those 2 formats. And then I'll have to come back and talk more to the other, after we do part 2, what the other 2 documentaries are. One of them is about a very famous doctor who munched on the alien abductions. And so I've got a whole documentary dedicated to him that's going to be coming. Again, this has been, half a dozen years in the making. And I'm really excited to share all this stuff and to, present hopefully, new projects in a new way that people haven't seen. and contribute to already. There's so many great filmmakers that have worked in the space. James Fox, just to name one. And so I'm really excited and happy to be continuing that and striving to show things that we've not seen in this field that we all love so much.
Absolutely. Love to hate to love. And no, you're right, man. Like it's a film like this is desperately needed, and we have you to thank for that. So we will put a link in the show notes for everyone to go watch that. And yeah, that's gonna do
I'm
it.
on Instagram.
I was gonna say, where can we find you?
Yeah, Dean Alioto, Instagram, really inventive, Dean Alioto. And then also on X at Dean Alioto. And again, if you're into TikTok, I'm at Captured Pictures Official.
Perfect. We'll put links to all that, guys. Go follow Dean, follow all of his work, and we will definitely have you back on when part 2 comes out. So thank you once again for joining me on Somewhere in the Skies.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
Look up in the sky. You're off in a corner of nowhere. We're nobodies. Maybe if we looked around a little bit, we could learn how to be somebodies.